I want to thank Minister Anne Rabbitte for coming in to take this topical tonight. Minister, we have huge issues in CHO5, in particular in Carlow. The CDNT in Carlow have over 200 children on the waiting list for autism assessments, and the children are taken off the list by the CDNT per date order unless prioritised as a high risk. These children are getting lost, and we need to do something urgently about it. I have a facility in Carlow which looks after children with special needs, and they have children scheduled to attend primary school in September who have never seen a therapist. They have not had any assessments of need. In over 4 decades, Holy Angels in Carlow has operated, and they have never seen this lack of service. Carlow County is operating with 1 psychologist for the entire county. They have very little support. That facility is on its knees regarding funding, Minister. They were allocated 21,000 for emergency support, and their gas bill alone was 29,000. So they are struggling. They are really struggling. There are other huge issues in special needs supports for children in CHO5. Just last month, trainee educational and child psychologists undertook the independent work in schools under supervision from the senior psychologists across the country. In practice, this meant that they were in schools by themselves working on cases that are part of the caseload that are responsible for this. This included undertaking assessments of learning needs, identifying dyslexia, dyscalculia and other issues. Solutions-based work with teachers and parents or interventions where pupils around their learning, emotional or behavioural needs. If the 25 trainees were not there to do this work around the country, then the already overworked NEP psychologists would have to take on these cases themselves, and the waiting times for assessments would even be longer. They receive no financial reimbursements other than the reduced rate of petrol expenses for travelling, which is another story, and Minister, that's another thing I want to address, which is the next day. All children must have the opportunity to thrive and to have access to an educational assessment of needs, the development of an individual education plan, the delivery of education supports and an independent appeal process. Schools must be fully accessible for all. We are waiting now for a new CINO for Carlow, so I'll ask you to look at that too. We are seeing massive delays in assessing assessments. Some from 2019 are only being looked at now in 2023. Recruitment, I know, and I know, Minister, you're very aware of this, is a massive issue, and the already overworked staff are just not able to get to the work. All the benefits of early intervention are being lost. These are issues I see with my own eyes, and last week I held a public meeting to assist the community to make submissions for the Department review on educational needs for children with special needs. I wanted to hear from families living the reality of this. The stories I heard, Minister, were horrific. I have one case of a child. This child has no access to OT, speech and language, and no assessment of need, even though in the school his needs are acute. We cannot give children the correct access education if they are not being met. We need to sort out the recruitment, and the system has to work for every child. We need urgent attention for children's health services in Carlow, CHO5. Can you please tell me that there is resources here? But also, Minister, I have to ask you the question. Have you confidence in the HSE that these services will be delivered? Because we have children that are really suffering here, and families that are absolutely crying out for help. Honestly, I know parents that have come to me and they are so upset because their children are not accessing and getting the service they need. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Murnane-O'Connor. Minister Rabbitte, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle, and thank you, Deputy Murnane-O'Connor, for asking and putting down this very important topical here this evening. So, if I could unpackage your question to me, I would really appreciate it. So your question, if I'm listening correctly, it's to do with the HSE and the CDNTs, it's to do with Holy Angels and the preschool services, and it has to do with schools and educational psychologists and NEPs. So let me try and unpackage that. So in relation to the Holy Angels and their receipt of the 21,000, Holy Angels is actually a designated under the Department of Special Ed. So the funding that they would have received the other day from my own department was a recognition of the SLA agreement that we have in place between Holy Angels and HC. I don't have full control over Holy Angels. I have only a portion of control over Holy Angels. So the Department of Education have a role here to play in supporting certain bills that are required to be paid, and that includes the ESB bill. But also, I think, Deputy, I think it's something that the management at Holy Angels, and maybe you can assist them with, is that a lot of the burden of expense that they have encountered over the last number of years was when they lost the CE support workers they used to assist them in their building. And the loss of those workers meant that they had then to take on additional staff at a cost. And I know very clearly that they have a serious deficit there, but I think the deficit is because perhaps in the past they leaned a lot on the CE scheme, who were absolutely brilliant when it came to maintenance, came to cleaning, but also came to the support piece of the additional staff member in a room. It was more than ratio, it was a support to the individual. So that's one piece unpackaged. Then you spoke a lot about the Epson. That sits under Minister Madigan. And to be quite honest with you, I'm not going to talk on Minister Madigan's brief, but I hear clearly what you're saying, that we have a deficit there when it comes to educational supports for children within education. So that is a piece there. And you talk there about the 25 traineeships, only for them, that perhaps children in education wouldn't get the psychological supports that they would need. And then coming on to my own brief, which is to do with the CD&T teams, and you have 3 CD&T teams in Carlow with only one psychologist, of which is not sufficient by any manner or means. And I think, Corla, in light of the TV programme that was on last night, I think it's important to say that was very disturbing watching. And I think I applaud Jennifer in relation to asking this question, because if we don't have psychologists, we cannot complete our assessment of needs. And that is a huge, huge issue for us. But what I have done is I have secured the funding of 11.5 million to clear the backlog of the 10,000 and in excess of 10,000 children that are waiting for that assessment of needs since 2021. So the 2019 figure is an educational figure, because I cleared the backlog. They are gone. I now have the figure of what has happened due to the PTA and what has happened since the court case last year. So we have a build-up in relation to assessment of needs, but particularly in relation to children needing an autism assessment. And for 200 children to be sitting on the books on any CD&T team is quite disturbing for not just the individual, the child and the family, but actually for the development of that child. And that's why, having secured the funding, it is my ambition that we will have regional hubs dealing with assessment of need to the full criteria that will ensure that every child will be seen in a timely fashion. And I will answer my confidence in the HSE next.
Thank you, Minister, and I know your commitment, and since you have become Minister, you have absolutely, I know I've worked with you now for a few years, and I want to welcome your comments there, and I also want to welcome the fact that you said you now have 11.5 million. About, like, I mean, as you spoke about the 200 children in Carlow, and I'm very much aware of the cases in Carlow. I think it worries me that when you look at a school like Holy Angels, that it just absolutely excels with children with disability, the service that they have. And while, as you said, Minister, they have CE supervisors or CE schemes, that were doing a lot of the work, it's sad now that we don't have the CE schemes anymore. It's something that we need to address. Yes. But we also should be in a position that a school like Holy Angels, the service they give, that when they need recruitment, that there should be funding there for them. Because I know myself, and I have to say, I'm on the board of Holy Angels, and I see the work that the Holy Angels, the school, the committee, the volunteers, and they are constantly fundraising. Mm-hmm. That's another thing. They are constantly, every few months. I know with COVID, everyone was affected more, and we could understand that. But it's just, I just feel that, we're always saying, and I know, Minister, you're always saying, We have to assess children early. And children leaving Holy Angel schools now that are going to go to a primary school, they aren't being assessed because there's no one to assess them. So if they can't be assessed when they're going into a primary school, sure, like, you know what I mean? We don't know what we can do there. So they need to be assessed before they leave Holy Angels to go to another school. So, Minister, I know how dedicated you are. Look, we have huge issues. I think we're nearly hitting. We were nearly hitting crisis point. I do believe your commitment and dedication and that extra funding will do a lot of good and will help a lot of children and their families. I've seen it at my public meeting. I've seen the stress on parents' faces. I've seen what they're going through, and it's their children.
Absolutely.
You know, they're there to represent their children and to do the best for their children and to give them the best chance in life. Thank you. Sorry.
And thank you, Ceann Comhairle. And Deputy, thank you very much again. And I know your involvement in Holy Angels, and I have visited. But if I just continue on there in relation to the 11.5 million, that's money that needs to be spent in ensuring that children have a proper assessment of need. I think we have a Disability Act and we need to work within that Disability Act. Children need that timely intervention, and it can no longer be words or lip service. We need action. And you asked me a very pertinent question there, if I have confidence in the HSE. My confidence is shattered in the HSE. What will restore my confidence is their pragmatic approach and their agile approach to ensuring that we can step up our regional hubs for assessment, and we can ensure that we can clear that backlog in a timely fashion. And we need to work with private industry that meet the proper regulations and criteria that is set out by the HSE to ensure that all children have it. And Ceann Comhairle, from your own area, Sensational Kids are a fantastic resource. Down in Cork, we have the Rainbow Club. We need to start working more with organisations that have the skills and the ability to actually help us deliver and meet the needs of children. What we witnessed last night, we cannot continue. The meeting that you had last week cannot continue. The meetings that I had last year cannot continue. I think it's time now that I demand, and I am demanding, that we have a pragmatic, pivoted approach from the HSE to take everybody under the tent to ensure that we work with all, that no children is left waiting. And you are right. Timely intervention in every child. We should be ambitious that all assessments are done before children go to school, so it's when they hit education, then it's an educational need, not a health assessment need that's required.